The following contains discussion and depictions of graphic violence, child endangerment, mental and emotional abuse, and various forms of familial abuse. Viewer discretion is advised. If there is one thing you need to know about Bioshock, it is that Bioshock is about daddy issues. Sure, the series explores a whole heap of other things: bodily autonomy, addiction, hedonism, libertarianism, free will, bigotry, hypocrisy, and the way malicious and selfish forces exploit lonely, frightened people for their own ends. Bioshock is about a lot of things, but it's mostly about the daddy issues. I mean, pretty much everyone important to the series has them. Jack has plural daddy issues, Elizabeth has temporal daddy issues, Delta has single daddy issues, Booker has identity daddy issues, Ryan has fatal daddy issues, Sophia Lamb has co-parent daddy issues, Columbia has founding daddy issues, Rapture has big daddy issues. They are everywhere. Literal, thematic, metaphorical, biological, hypothetical. The list goes on. And yet, I rarely see people talk about them. Audiences might comment on how there are dads, they do factually exist. Fatherhood plays a role in the Would You Kindly reveal, Delta's motivation is nothing but paternal, and the entire emotional through line of Booker and Elizabeth's whole thing is about daddy issues. But it is always a surface level statement. There are dads. Rapture also wet. More rigorous academic discussions have also left me unsatisfied. The essay collection Beyond the Sea, Navigating Bioshock is practically luxurious for having 2 essays discussing fatherhood and its associated themes, but even those feel like they're engaging with their own assumptions of archetypical fatherhood, rather than the complicated depictions within the actual series. They do make salient points and have their own merit, but the goal seems to be to prove their point rather than analyze Bioshock, which feels odd. Fatherhood is so obvious and integral to the series that I would have expected people to thoroughly exhaust those themes before tackling the fiddlier, more niche topics of objectivism, cultish ideology, or poorly handled racism. Bioshock is a complicated web of fatherhood and paternity, and how people interact with those ideas. Beneath the philosophy and horror and aesthetic and gunplay and moral choice, these games are about daddy issues. A brief synopsis of these games lays the truth bare. In Bioshock 1, you play as Jack, a man trying to survive the city of Rapture after his plane crashes in the middle of the Atlantic. Jack teams up with the friendly and somewhat paternal Atlas, a revolutionary trying to oust the objectivist dictator Andrew Ryan.
I don't know how you survived that plane crash, but I've never been one to question Providence. I'm Atlas, and I aim to keep you alive.
Ryan periodically radios in to criticize and threaten you, occasionally sending hordes of enemies to kill you. Along the way, you learn about the strange genetic perversities happening in this underwater city, such as plasmids, little sisters, and big daddies. You eventually learn that Atlas is actually the ruthless thug Fontaine, who has arranged for Ryan to be assassinated by his genetically altered son. Jack is that genetically altered son. It's all very intense. Jack is forced to kill Ryan and goes on a quest to free himself from Fontaine's influence, culminating in Jack killing Fontaine. The game's ending is determined by whether Jack helped the innocent little sisters or harmed them. Bioshock 2 is in dialogue with many of the themes of the first game, expounding on some and serving as a counterpoint to others. You play as Subject Delta, an early model Big Daddy that was separated from his little sister through traumatic means. Delta traverses the entire city trying to save his foster daughter from her biological mother, the cult leader, Sophia Lamb. Lamb periodically radios in to criticize and threaten you, occasionally sending hordes of enemies to kill you. Delta faces numerous ethical dilemmas as he fights well-intentioned criminals, violent zealots, and traumatized victims that all want his head. Eventually, he saves his daughter Eleanor, though he is unable to survive the rescue. It made me cry, very big tears. Eleanor's outlook on the world and her subsequent actions are determined by Delta's behavior in the game. Bioshock Infinite is A bit of a mess, but we're going to focus on the topic at hand rather than dig into everything wrong with the game, as is so tempting to do. It is best described as a funhouse mirror of the first two Bioshock games. All of the features are there, more or less, just squashed and stretched into a different shape. You play as the jaded former Pinkerton, Booker DeWitt, who was hired to kidnap a girl from the Sky City, Columbia. Booker is quickly identified as the false prophet by Columbia's religious dictator, Zachary Comstock, and must fight his way through the city as he searches for his target, Elizabeth, Comstock's daughter, and a young woman with the ability to jump between realities. They reluctantly team up and learn more about Elizabeth's strange powers, while Comstock shouts at you from a dirigible and periodically sends in enemies to kill you. Eventually, Booker kills Comstock and they escape the city. Elizabeth then tells Booker that she is his daughter, and he sold her as a baby before attempting to change his mind, and, most importantly, that he, Booker DeWitt, is Comstock from another timeline. Elizabeth must now kill every version of Comstock, else risk one of them attempting world conquest yet again. And Booker is the first one she starts with. This outcome is set regardless of what you do. It's all very intense. Burial at Sea is the narrative DLC for Bioshock Infinite set in Rapture. Booker from a different timeline teams up with Elizabeth to find a missing girl while working through some of their family issues.
I am so sorry.
No, you're not. But you're about to be.
Kind of. Elizabeth also kicks off the series of events that start the first game, but with the intent of saving the little sisters and making up for her unhinged vengeance quest. It is all very intense. I cried for a solid 45 minutes after I finished this game. I am perhaps the only person aside from Noah Caldwell-Gervais that played this and appreciated this game for what it is. Notice me, senpai. I think we'd have a lovely time chatting about road tripping and sad men in video games. As you might have noticed, the narrative engine of near every story in this series is the relationship between a father and their child, and just how badly those relationships can fall apart.
I haven't chosen the spot for you on the wall yet. Let me know if you have a preference.
Moreover, there are different flavors of fatherhood: biological, theological, ideological, and thematic-logical, and all with their own quirks and traits. Because of this diversity, Bioshock never gives a definitive statement on how to be a father or what a father should be. It doesn't even laud the values of fatherhood itself, resisting the siren song of the literal patriarchy to elevate fathers above everyone else. Fathers simply are. Fatherhood is a state of being that happens sometimes, and the game wants to explore every facet of it that it can. The good and bad, the themes and methods and societal attitudes involved are all laid out equally and dispassionately for our perusal. Which is, perhaps, why the prevalence of fatherhood in Bioshock has gone largely unnoticed. Whereas the games are screaming at you that objectivism is dumb, cults are deplorable, racism is a loser ideology, and violent zealotry of any sort is a pointless, miserable venture, its thoughts on fatherhood are intensely quiet. If a thesis even exists, it would be something atrociously bland. Perhaps, fathers have an impact on their kids. If you're not already looking for it, the subject could completely pass you by. It's tempting to diagnose this emphasis as a symptom of the dadification of video games. It's largely forgotten now, but in the late 2010s, it felt like everyone was in a tizzy about the broody, older male heroes that found themselves responsible for weird adolescence and then had to do a whole character arc about it. God of War 2018, Dishonored, The Last of Us 2, and The Witcher 3 all fit this trend very, very well, but I argue that it is largely coincidence. Several game studios needed to create investment in middle-aged male protagonists without necessarily relying on romance. And so, tossing a child at a gruff middle-aged man and making him open up and get all gooey about it serves as plot motivator, character builder, and stakes raiser in one. Have child, will care. And it just feels like we should nuzzle Bioshock Infinite, and indeed all of the Bioshock games, into this nook. We must resist that nuzzling. While the great dadification may offer some helpful objects of comparison and even analysis, Bioshock isn't this way because of the daddening. Bioshock was talking about these things from the very beginning. As we progress into our daddy deep dive, we have to acknowledge that the concept of fatherhood is informed by the societies that it exists in. Both Rapture and Columbia are extreme, satirized versions of classic American ideals. They are intensely patriarchal, capitalist, aggressive, bigoted societies built by patriarchal, capitalist, aggressive, bigoted men. Andrew Ryan has laid out thoroughly modern and deeply absurd commandments about how to be a real man, which is then parroted back by the Rapture populace.
If I can afford to see the doctor, is it my concern that others cannot? No, says the damnable parasite. We must all crowd our way into the physician's office.
Men are supposed to be proactive, cunning, individualistic, and agents of their own fate. They are also violent, impatient, greedy, volatile, inconsiderate, and intensely unable to relate to anyone other than themselves. Comstock, meanwhile, lauds a classic form of American masculinity, but under the guise of spirituality and wisdom. The men of Columbia are still taught to be tribal, aggressive zealots, but with a focus on conformity and hierarchy. Good fathers obey Comstock, and everyone else obeys good fathers. Booker is somewhat of a complicating factor here, as he is Comstock in another life and theoretically should be discussed here, but for the sake of this essay, I will be treating them as different beings. They have different mentalities, attitudes, mannerisms, goals, statuses, and, in my humble opinion, weren't intended to be the same person until quite late into production, so I feel confident in this decision. I do occasionally acknowledge them as the same individual where mandated by the plot and themes, but unless otherwise stated, they will be treated as separate, and thus he plays no role in shaping the ideology of the societies he lives in. While, again, the games don't endorse Rapture and Columbia's rigid mentalities, and instead ruthlessly lampoons them, the in-game societies embrace them completely. They are the norm of these societies and the context against which everything is set. This is also the context that I'll be situating my analysis in. While I think the game's handling of subjects like gender and heteronormativity should be interrogated, that is somewhat outside of the scope of this essay. As much as possible, I want to meet the series on its own terms and explores what it is doing rather than try to interpret or project upon what it isn't. Some of my discussion at times may seem rather absolute on subjects like gender roles or sexuality, but that is to engage with the ideas and mentality of the people depicted in these games rather than reflecting the world beyond them. Love and violence. The first thing you're probably going to notice about fatherhood in Bioshock is that it's defined by violence. Most things in Bioshock are defined by violence, if we're honest. Why would we imagine fatherhood to be any different? One of our first glimpses of the series is a big daddy protecting a little sister, and with supreme prejudice. Bioshock 1 doubles down on this idea, as the first major introduction of a big daddy is, yet again, through absurd and unhinged violence.
That's the big daddy. She got it on him. He keeps her safe.
The first several interactions you have with the Big Daddy are defined by violence. It was such an effective lesson that I spent much of my first playthrough skirting past Big Daddies, certain that they would always be violent if I veered too close, when in truth, they remain passive unless provoked. Big Daddies perform other duties for their little sisters, such as offering companionship and, to some degree, teaching them about the world, but they are first and foremost zealous defenders of their little girls. In Rapture, more so than anywhere else, the best defense is a truly vicious offense. This idea, of course, carries into Bioshock 2 with Subject Delta. He fights his way through an entire city to rescue his little girl, reaffirming their bond through bloodshed. When they are reunited, their relationship is deepened by being able to fight together, Eleanor quite literally following in his footsteps.
These suits always did make me think of you, Father. I guess I still remember you in shining armor. But now it's my turn to fight for you.
It is, of course, violence that also separates them.
Place it against your head.
Even setting Big Daddies aside, the paternal relationships and representations of this game are coded in violence. Booker is stabbed Ethan Winters style through the symbol of his paternal guilt. Comstock is murdered after laying hands on Elizabeth. Fontaine, Ryan, and Booker are all killed by their own children. Fatherhood in Bioshock cannot be engaged with unless it is through violence, blood, and pain.
He's nicer than other daddies.
Which is curious, is it not? Violence is hardly value neutral, and violent fathers are even worse. The world of Bioshock may be an inherently brutal one, but there is a difference between living in a violent world and having every important paternal act performed through, associated with, or defined by intense bouts of violence. There is an intentionality here, which begs the question of why. The answer is not, mind you, that Bioshock doesn't see a problem with violence. Yes, Bioshock is a first-person shooter built off the back of spectacular, deeply absurd violence. They gave you a chemical thrower and filled it with napalm. Clearly, the devs of Bioshock want you to have fun tearing through this ghastly little world. But the gameplay is, quite literally, play fighting. It is about the sport of it, the skill of combating an enemy well, the performance of completing a bout untouched, rather than causing another actual physical pain. But the challenge of clearing an arena or overcoming a difficult enemy is entirely different from the scripted set pieces the story forces you to endure. When you pass through a doorway and see that Ryan has speared people to the wall, when you see all of the people Sophia Lamb drowned just to spite you, when you see a mixed couple about to be stoned to death for daring to love across racial lines, there is no doubt that the games want you to be repelled. The games do not want you to be pleased when you see someone be run through, when the flesh melts from your bones, when you deliver a golf club to someone's brain. The framing is wrong. The music is wrong. The screams of agony and the slow drips of blood are wrong. Those are not moments of sport or skill, they are sheer horror. The violence of Bioshock can be fun, yes. Rapture and Columbia are not but evil little playgrounds. But even then, there is no point where you can engage in the violence and think, this is normal, fine, and good. To reach a point where you are casually given a chemical thrower full of napalm means that something has gone disastrously wrong. Signs of a failed moral code, or, at the very worst, a failed state. Mechanically, they are playgrounds, but narratively, they are violent nightmares, and the games will never let you forget. Booker and Delta are treated as monsters because of their efficacy at killing people. Jack is presented as a tragedy because he was robbed of his youth and instead given a gun. Even Subject Sigma, admit it, you thought I skipped Minerva's 10, is seen as a failure of Rapture itself because they cannibalized a brilliant scientist and turned him into a cheap war machine. And I think it's important that all of the Rapture-based narratives ask whether you want to be even more violent and cruel, or if you want to offer mercy and kindness. Do you kill the area bosses of Bioshock 2? There's nothing here to stop you. It would be just in its way. It would be well-earned vengeance. After all they've put you through, it might even just feel good. But that's easy, right? That's just a whim and a single bullet, and then you're done. What about when you get real, tangible rewards for engaging in the worst aspects of humanity? Do you harvest a little sister, or do you save her instead?
But Rapture's a high-stakes town, son, and she is a jackpot. You just have to be willing to take it all. You'll harvest more atom than the price of one plasmid, so the rest is gravy. Think about it. Down here, it's your survival or hers.
It makes sense to harvest them. Rapture rewards brutality, and you get plenty of new toys if you take what you need. Atom, the fantastical resource that allows you superpowers, is hard-won. And the game even tells you that it's not a bad idea if you get more. Besides, the people you meet don't even view the little sisters as properly human. Not anymore, at least. It is a choice you freely get to make. and mechanically, there are no drawbacks. Narratively, however, there are consequences, because of course there are. The game gave you a choice, an absurd choice, murdering a child or letting her live, and yet you chose to value magic gasoline over her life.
But it was not intended to be a prurient in terms of, hey, this is a simulation of pulling a sea slug out of a little girl's belly. But we wanted you to understand that you were making a very diabolical moral economic pact there.
No, you don't get to end your game on a triumphant high note. No, you don't get to be praised as a hero for all you've done. You did something deeply vile and wrong, and there are consequences. Booker underlines this dilemma, though he approaches it from a different direction. Bioshock Infinite has received complaints about being weirdly determinist in a series about free will, and while I think the execution is incredibly messy, I still think it supports the free will theme. Booker is caught in a cycle of always choosing the violent option, either by necessity or by habit.
What if I went back? Killed him before he did any of this?
Things get set in motion.
How would one know how far back to go?
That's the only way to do it. Go back to when he was born, and I'll smother the son of a bitch in his crib.
And while I suspect I'm in the minority with this opinion, I don't think it's because of some cosmic predetermined reason. I think it's because he, Booker the man, cannot stop himself from choosing the violent option. He cannot understand the world through a peaceful lens. No matter what warnings he receives, no matter what he experiences, no matter what the player does, he will keep making that choice and reaping its miserable reward.
They haven't changed you, Booker. Not one bit.
I don't think Elizabeth kills Booker because, in a few timelines, he was radicalized to become Zachary Comstock and she's being overly cautious. I think she kills him because even after everything she showed him and told him and they lived through, his first response was to decide to smother a baby to ease his own guilt.
Booker, are you sure this is what you want?
I have to. It's the only way to undo what I've done to you.
Booker DeWitt, are you ready to be born again?
No matter what, he keeps making that choice. Burial at Sea carries that theme farther, exploring the generational consequences of that compulsion to violence. Now it's Elizabeth making the violent choice again and again and again, repeatedly choosing to murder her father in every single timeline, until the game quite literally body slams her into realizing that she is wrong. It is only when she realizes that she needs to save someone rather than callously use and discard them that both she and the narrative are finally allowed to rest. With all of that context, we must again ask, why? If the series takes such a hard stance against the idea of violence, proves to us time and time and time again that it is a despicable cancer to both the individual and society, why is it so fundamental to Bioshock's depiction of fatherhood? On a base level, Bioshock is beholden to its genre. These games are both action-adventure stories and suspenseful horror dramas. Violence is not merely fundamental to fatherhood, it's fundamental to the meta-sensibilities of the games themselves. But Bioshock goes a step deeper, saying, well, this is a world where violence has seeped into the morals and the very DNA of its inhabitants. What does that do to fatherhood? How do fathers interact with their children in a world where violence is the first and most valid form of communication? Pretty badly. The answer's pretty badly. It shouldn't be surprising that such caustic environments result in painful, abusive dynamics between fathers and their children, And again, the series doesn't validate such abuse so much as state it as a fact. Sometimes, fathers harm their children. Sometimes, children harm their fathers. It is a cruel reality of life, one with often disastrous, far-reaching effects. Andrew Ryan spends practically the entire first game trying to kill Jack, even after he realizes that Jack is his son. And when he's not doing that, he is belittling him, mocking him, and verbally abusing him.
My city will live. My city will thrive. And when that day comes, we'll use your tombstone for pavement tiles.
Ryan is a paranoid, cold, unfeeling man that actively rejects any form of empathy or human connection. Of course, that treatment extends to the child he never knew he had. Right up to the end, he's more fixated on opposing Jack, condemning him rather than doing anything else. When they finally meet, it is cruel as it is perverse.
Now that I see flesh to flesh and blood to blood, I know I cannot raise my hand against you. But know this, you are my greatest disappointment.
Ryan doesn't hurt Jack physically, but he does everything in his power to make him feel small, helpless, and ashamed.
Was a man sent to kill, or a slave? A man chooses. A slave obeys.
He knows that Jack is a victim of genetic tampering, a hostage in his own body, a slave to Atlas's trigger phrase.
Sit, would you kindly? Stand, would you kindly? Run! Stop! Turn. A man chooses. A slave obeys.
But rather than trying to find a solution, rather than trying to break the genetic control, rather than, heaven forbid, empathizing with his own son, Ryan chooses to commit emotional violence. He sneers at him. He mocks him. Ryan even gives Jack his own murder weapon, because rather than try to live, he wants to underline what a small, pathetic, insignificant creature his son is.
A man chooses. A slave obeys.
Fontaine, little surprise, isn't much better as a surrogate father. While he is encouraging and complimentary when disguised as Atlas, it's easy, a relief even, for him to drop the act and be openly cruel to Jack.
But now, go get stepped on by a big daddy, would you kindly?
In many ways, this manipulation is more malicious than Ryan's cold abuse, because Fontaine secures Jack's trust only to shatter it once convenient. At least Jack knew Ryan hated him. At least Ryan didn't mislead him. At least Ryan didn't strip him of his only friend.
I really wound you up with that wife and child bit. Oh, me poor Moira! Baby, wee baby Patrick! Maybe one day I'll get me a real family. They play well with this.
Hurry, Mr. B.
After that, Fontaine is just as vicious and mocking as Ryan ever was, sending hordes of killers after Jack and occasionally calling him up just to confuse, insult, and frighten him.
That's it, kid. It's been a long road. You don't even remember most of it. Put you on a sub when you were just a sprout.
The only thing Jack has learned from either of his father figures is how to be malicious, selfish, petty, and deeply cruel. He might decide to be better than either of them, to rise above their miserable, misanthropic ways. Or he might just take those lessons to heart. Comstock is similar to Ryan and Fontaine in spirit, if not in deed. His mistreatment of Elizabeth is more emotional than physical. She is vital to his plan, and if she dies, his dreams of conquest die with her. Much better to isolate Elizabeth, break her will, and make her subservient to him. However, he isn't afraid of applying force from afar, just as Ryan did.
You chose to follow a false shepherd, and he has led you astray. What I do for love. What lion does not cringe to see their coven pain, but spare the rod, spoil the child?
He enforces her imprisonment with Songbird, the mechanical cyborg, sends soldiers to forcibly steal her back from Booker, and sanctions untold horrendous experiments on her. But of course, once she finally is within reach, he doesn't hesitate to lay hands on her. Just like Ryan and Fontaine, Comstock doesn't really mind hurting his child in the service of his own interests. Booker is somewhat the inverse, starting on the wrong foot and maintaining an uneasy relationship for the first third of the game.
Hello.
When he and Elizabeth do settle into their father-daughter dynamic, Booker is often rough and emotionally distant.
I don't really understand what I just saw back there, but it sure as hell looks like a shortcut to getting us killed.
However, the most intense acts of violence within the relationship typically come from Elizabeth.
Come on, everything's gonna be okay. Will you just turn around and talk to me and we can...
From the first moment she met Booker, Elizabeth tried to be violent with him. Once she realized he lied to her, she was violent with him. When he upsets her, when she feels betrayed by him, she is violent with him. And, of course, there are the 2 times that we see on screen where Elizabeth resorts to killing Booker. First, to prevent him from being metaphorically reborn as Comstock, and then as an act of runaway vengeance. And if there are any doubts, the entirety of Burial at Sea Part 2 talks about how incorrect Elizabeth was for pursuing unhinged violence.
Had to be done.
Did it?
I felt everything that every version of me felt. All of that knowledge. I lost a pinky, but that version of me, she lost everything. And Comstock, that final Comstock, he thought he could avoid his guilt by coming here.
You educated him proper.
But then why am I back here?
The ethics, rightness, and reasons for her behavior are deeply complicated and a bit beyond our scope, so I'll table that discussion here. But still, it means something that Elizabeth's key moments with Booker are marked by violence, and much of it stems from her. Even their positive interactions are stained by brutality. Booker embraces carnage to keep her safe. Their most intimate conversations are wrought from bloodshed. Elizabeth asks Booker to express his sincere care for her by killing her, should worst come to worst. And it's through witnessing acts of barbarism that Elizabeth is able to understand and relate to Booker as a person.
Listen.
How do you do it?
How do I do what?
Forget. How do you wash away the things that you've done?
You don't. You just learn to live with it.
Violence is not only their sole mode of engagement, it's their sole mode of empathy. There are other, lesser instances scattered throughout the series. So-called Papa Suchongs hitting a little sister when she annoys him, a Big Daddy murdering Suchong in response, Delta and Sigma having to fight Big Sisters, their formatic former wards, in order to take care of their current ones, the Little Sisters. Even Cohen, everyone's favorite artiste, can be thrown into the mix as the artistic progenitor of his apprentices. He puts them through increasingly absurd, violent tasks before finally demanding their execution from Jack. I can't say that every instance here is an intentional contribution to the violent father-child dynamic rather than an incidental one, but they contribute to the general milieu. Once you start seeing red cars, it's hard to stop.
Well, that's the end of the Alpha series. The pair bond simply worked too well. That madwoman Tannenbaum bit the company hand, turning some of the bonded sisters human again. Others were lost to splices. Either way, the trauma proved too much for the bonded protectors, resulting in unreasoning rage or coma. We can harness their suicidal aggression as foot soldiers, but no more, I'm afraid. Today I saw one kneeling near a gatherer's garden and crying.
The more interesting element to this, I find, is when the violence is positive rather than negative. This might be a little alarming after such a thorough case against these violent relationships, but the context and framing are different. Rather than a parent or child forcing violence onto each other, they are accepting it on behalf of the other. This is not ruthless brutality, but an act of love through well-considered sacrifice. Sacrifice is a common motif in familial stories. I love you so much that I will go without. I love you so much that I will suffer for you. I love you enough that I will do this thing because you ask. It's so common that we might assume it to be the default, the thing that will happen time and time again. If you love someone, you will prove it by always thinking of them first. In Bioshock, that is obviously not the case.
I remember when me and the crowd put you in that sub. You were no more than 2. You were my ace in the hole, but you were also the closest thing I ever had to a son. And that's why this hurts. Betrayal, kid. Life ain't strictly business.
This is an idea that I've already alluded to throughout the essay, but hopefully it is more poignant now that we have context. In a world as cruel and selfish as Bioshock's, where you are encouraged to think only of yourself, betray and exploit anyone that gets in your way, it is all the more meaningful when you choose self-sacrifice instead. It means something when people choose love over personal gain, when they aid others at the cost of their own well-being, when they step back and choose to accept someone else's goals or worldviews over their own. And honestly, this act of love is only heightened by being portrayed through the vehicle of violence, because it wasn't easy and it wasn't comfortable. It's not the simple mundanities of offering them a bite of your dessert, or doing an idle chore, or giving up your time to take care of them.
Who's he? He's the one who saved me.
It is bloodshed. My love is so great that I performed violence for you. My love is so great that I suffered violence for you. I love you. I have engaged with violence for you. The examples vary in intensity and scope, from brief suggestions to game-long journeys. The little sisters risk themselves to help Jack kill Fontaine. Mark Metzer goes to absurd lengths to retrieve his daughter before ultimately being murdered in the attempt.
She doesn't even recognize me. What have they done to her? Listen to her.
The man in the moon is a girl, Mr. Bubbles.
Listen, if anyone hears this, I have to know how to cure her. No! Get back! She's my little girl!
Delta cuts his way through Rapture to save Eleanor. Eleanor risks her comfort and safety to protect and guide her father. But one of the most haunting instances of this is with Jack. In the last section of the first game, you are tasked with impersonating a Big Daddy so that a little sister will harvest Adam for you. I've heard criticisms of this quest, calling it cumbersome and boring, and I agree, it can be a bit of a chore when you just want to get along and end things. A metaphor for the mundane difficulties of parenthood is within easy reach, but there is something about this process that just shatters me. The process of becoming a Big Daddy is wicked and cruel, where men are stolen, sewn into suits, and have their brains tampered with. Thankfully, Jack avoids the worst of it, but he can't escape the horrible reality when even the tread of his footsteps are reminders of what is happening. Beneath all of the efficient sterility, this part of the game gives the impression of a meat factory, men lining up and being repackaged to be consumed by the city. Thankfully, Jack merely slips on the Big Daddy's guise rather than being ground down and piped into one. He is not grafted into his Big Daddy suit, nor does he permanently exude the Big Daddy's stench. But he doesn't escape all of it. There is something truly brutal about the simplicity of the voice changer, its psychological horror laid bloody and bare. You know what that device does. Its uncovered blades caked in dried blood. You know exactly what you have to do. You can only fathom how much it's going to hurt. But still you walk up to it, let it grab you, and you stand there, shaking and screaming as the knife cuts and reshapes you, rendering your howls into the low, deep-sea groans of a Big Daddy. From then on, Jack's grunts of pains and exertion sound monstrous. From then on, Jack has a new voice. There is something to be said for Jack permanently losing his voice to the City of Rapture and being turned into this creature to survive. But there is also something to be said for Jack knowingly doing this. He willingly, fundamentally changes to step into the shoes of a father. But the example that has the most far-reaching consequences, and is more complicated in its sacrifice, is Booker. Miserable pile of problems that he is, he still sacrifices for Elizabeth. He frames many of his actions as necessities. He has to kill Songbird, he has to kill Comstock, he has to cut the hand off of Annabelle Comstock's corpse. And yes, it is admittedly much easier for him to do all of these things in order to keep the plucky wonder kid at his side. But I argue he could have cut and run at any time. Booker is a resourceful person, and while, yes, the odds are exceptionally against his favor, I feel like it wouldn't be that difficult for him to fly one of those aerial ships back down to Earth. Instead, he chooses to stay with Elizabeth, chooses to stay for Elizabeth. In the few hours they've known each other, she has become like a daughter to him. He wants to take care of her. He has to save her. He has to prevent bad things from happening to her. No matter how much extra pain it costs him, no matter how far they wander from their path, he sacrifices his time, effort, and body for her.
Wasn't the torture that broke me. Wasn't the indoctrination. It was time. Time rots everything, Booker. Even hope.
I was coming.
Songbird. He always stops you.
Yes, but I would find a way.
Even the end of the game, I argue, is a sacrifice for her sake. In the last few seconds of Bioshock Infinite, Booker realizes that he is Comstock, recognizes that the nightmarish future he just fought through was inevitable, and understands that he will become the biggest threat to his own daughter.
He's Zachary Comstock. He's Booker DeWitt.
No. I'm both.
So, he lets Elizabeth drown him in the place of his rebirth. Perhaps this is a radical read on the events of the game. I first played these over the course of 2023 and 2024, and most of the discussion of Bioshock Infinite these days seems more interested in pulping over the same few criticisms rather than analyzing what the game is trying to say. So it's a little difficult to understand where everyone else stands on this. But regardless, I remain convinced. Booker could have fought Elizabeth. He might not have won against so many versions of her, against so many powerful versions of her, but we know that Booker DeWitt does not go quietly into anything.
There's so many choices.
They all lead us to the same place, where it started.
No one tells me where to go.
He could have, would have, raged against the dying of his light. But after seeing what miseries Elizabeth had gone through and would go through because of him, after seeing what greater catastrophes Elizabeth was trying to prevent, he let go. He let her kill him. His death is now a sacrifice. I suspect there are many that would disagree with me. This is a complicated narrative wrought from a very flawed source. But we've seen a lot of sacrifice in this series, where fathers willingly give up their health, time, and reputation for the sake of their children. We've just spent an entire game seeing how not doing that ruined Booker's life. And when compared to Jack and Ryan, the difference feels almost obvious. Booker isn't spitefully allowing Elizabeth to kill him like Ryan did Jack, nor is Elizabeth a helpless tool in someone else's hands. This isn't Jack blindly charging forward because a quest marker told him. This is Elizabeth synthesizing the reality of infinite universes and trying to explain things to Booker as best she can. Trying to allow him space to change, trying to warn him of what's to come.
Booker, are you sure this is what you want?
Things become more complicated in retrospect, but in this moment, I believe they were both acting, or refusing to act, out of love. And of course, when we speak about sacrificial affection, Big Daddies are the ultimate undiluted form. Their entire lives are dedicated to supporting and protecting their little sisters. Their devotion is so intense that some Big Daddies will die or even go mad if they are separated from them. Once a Big Daddy is given a little sister, his sole purpose is to take care of her, a grim reflection of the ideal role a father plays in real life. Of course, Big Daddies are complicated by the fact that this sacrifice isn't strictly of their own volition. Similar to Jack, Big Daddies have been so genetically tortured that their sense of agency is compromised.
You are a very old Big Daddy, bonded for life to a single little one. When you are apart for too long, your body begins to shut down like a coma. As long as the girl is in the rapture, you are trapped here as well.
They have to take care of their little sisters. They can't even imagine doing something else once she's gone. Even becoming a Big Daddy is done without consent. The candidates are all criminals or political inconveniences, forced through a horrific medical process that reduces their life's purpose to just one thing. The paternal theme isn't even the focus in fiction. Rapture scientists were merely trying to protect the atom-gathering asset that is a little sister, and their assigned guardians weren't doing their job, so there you go. They hacked into the paternal drive and called these guardians Big Daddies. This is later retconned in Burial at Sea, but that's not my fault. Please work with me. These noble, fatherly sacrifices feel suspect when you know it's due to a handful of scientists simply tampering with someone's brain. To be fair, the concept of having free will and the agency to perform a sacrifice is messy in this series. We can discard all of these loving acts as invalid if we really wanted to. The Big Daddies and Jack both had their free will stripped through genetic tampering. Booker and Elizabeth were fated to do the things they did, so intentions don't matter. Eleanor was a traumatized kid whose brain was scrambled by experimentation, Adam, and her mother's own cultish meddling, so yeah, it makes sense that she attached herself to the closest safe authority figure. How can we give love meaning, Eleanor, when we have no true ability to choose? We are puppets on the strings of larger forces, and this whole concept of positive sacrifice is moot. Fatherhood is a construct, the essay is over, and we are done. Aside from being absurdly cynical, this is also an incredibly shallow take. Bioshock explores the idea of free will and agency, yes, and people often suffer terrible situations and deal with unjust consequences. But the point isn't to rub your face in your own helplessness. It's to ask what decisions you do make when acted upon by higher, uncontrollable forces. What do you do? Do you turn these poor little girls into slugs because you want every advantage? Or do you give up a few resources so you can ensure their safety? Do you abandon your father because your association puts you in danger, or do you continue to offer him comfort, guidance, and support? Do you abandon the young woman you just met because she's a lot of trouble and you're in over your head, or do you stick with her, risk the increased danger, and try to help her through the worst day of her life? As for the Big Daddy himself, Subject Delta, it feels even more ludicrous to reduce him to just his hormones after playing him for an entire game. Yes, he is compelled to love and save Eleanor, But that doesn't mean he couldn't seek a loophole, find something to free himself from this genetic bond. That's literally the back half of the plot in the first game. Big Daddies, for all of the efforts to dehumanize them, are intelligent creatures, reasoning their way through life because they are still people. I was in his shoes. I saw all of the myriad choices he made, the intelligent, deliberate decisions, the specific conclusions he draws about the world around him. Delta wasn't just trying to possessively reunite with his daughter because his brain chemistry was all messed up. He was trying to reunite with her to empower her, save her, free her from the clutches of rapture. And he was willing to give his life to do it. These are sacrifices only because a choice was made, and at no point can we assume they are a foregone conclusion. Otherwise, Comstock, Fontaine, and Ryan would have also made them, would have protected their children as a default. Otherwise, Elizabeth wouldn't have kicked off the plot of Burial at Sea by launching headfirst into patricide. Otherwise, Jack wouldn't have the option to sacrifice little sisters by the time the game declares him a potential father figure. You can't synthesize the bond between a father and their child. That always comes from them, because it's a human connection, good or bad. Love is just a chemical. We give it meaning by choice. Amidst all of this praise, I don't want it to seem like I'm idolizing violent sacrifice between a father and their child. Personally, I'm quite wary of the trend that says the best expression of love is the one done through suffering. While the genre of angry dads doing a killing spree to feel better about personal loss can be entertaining, it is also deeply worrisome. It suggests that love is more valid after staggering amounts of bloodshed, that no acts of kindness, no emotional support, no daily mundane displays of affection are worthwhile unless proven by a deranged killing spree. I am worried when stories normalize violence as a love language, because at the end of the day, it is still violence. It is still hurting other people or yourself, and violence, if nothing else, is infectious. As we see in these games, it usually spreads quickly, ruthlessly, and only ends when there is no one left to be violent. But we must yet again meet the series where it is, and it is in the midst of a horrific dystopian setting, defined by violence.
What's the hold-up?
Just having a bit of a laugh, Atlas.
This ain't a sporting event. Put a bullet in her. No need to torture the poor girl. We're not animals, you know.
All right.
In this world, these men are not granted the luxury of displaying their love through mundane means, tucking their children at night, teaching them how to read, or hugging them when they get scared. Most of them can't even speak to their daughters to tell them that they love them, either due to physical or psychological barriers. Yes, if you get the good ending of Bioshock 1, you can see Jack step into this sort of loving mundanity as he takes care of the little sisters, but over the course of the actual game, there is no room for that. There is no time. These people must focus on survival, doing what little they can between the blood and the chaos. In this run-and-gun world, all these men can do to show their affection is to serve, protect, and sacrifice, and so they use the flawed tools at their disposal.
Elizabeth, you...
Promise me.
I will stop him.
That is an oath you cannot keep. But promise me that if it comes to it, you will not let him take me back.
It won't come to that. All right?
Motherhood. For a game so intense about men and the paternal experience, it has a surprising amount to say about mothers. They are admittedly periphery to this male-centric experience. None of the main characters are mothers, and rarely do the games engage with maternity on any meaningful level. Not to mention, fandom discussion around motherhood is frustratingly thin. Beyond a few unkind comments towards Sophia Lamb and maybe a fond acknowledgement of Dr. Tenenbaum, there's not much to be said at all. In a similar vein, I continue to be unimpressed by the academic contributions to the subject, as there really only seems to be one, perhaps two people talking about it at all. Navigating Bioshock particularly frustrates me, as the essays involving motherhood tend to be rather myopic in scope. Which is an incredible shame, because these games are surprisingly nuanced in their treatment of motherhood and how it interacts with fatherhood, and thus, our digression. Again, I want to stress that this exploration of motherhood isn't to determine how good these women are at being mothers. The series is not imposing some arbitrary standard on them and telling you where they succeed or fail. Just as with fathers, the idea of motherhood is allowed to spin out and fall where it may in this harsh, bleak world. One of the most striking things about the series' handling of mother and fatherhood is how it separates them. In most stories, parental units are usually a consequence of romance. When a big daddy loves a big mommy very, very much, so on and so forth. But in Bioshock, the idea of romance is largely frivolous. It exists. Romantic love happens to people, but it rarely has any bearing on the series. In fact, none of the main characters or supporting cast are involved with romance in any way, with the sole exception of Charles Milton Porter in Minerva's Den. This DLC is a thematic oddity in the series because it steps back from the intense messaging about paternity by stepping forward into romance. Porter's love for his wife is not only the catalyst for him creating his supercomputer, but also functions as the game's emotional core.
I am set to test the personality duplication function. Target personality, Pearl Porter. Thinker, are you ready?
Yes, Milton.
Starting test. Hello, Pearl.
Hello, Milton.
How have you been?
Just wonderful, Milton. I've missed you, though. It's been so long.
Fatherhood is present in the trappings. You are still playing as a big daddy, you are engaging with little sisters, but the narrative linchpin is empathizing with this tragic romance of the past. And even then, the Porter's romance doesn't segue into any sort of parenthood on its own, nor is there any real suggestion that they desired it to. Romantic pairs and parental units are distinctly separate in this series, because in Bioshock, romantic or sexual attraction isn't necessary for parenthood. In Bioshock, you become a parent solely by developing a relationship with a child. By and large, the traditional parental unit simply does not exist in the series. Anything coming close is thematic periphery or established off-screen. These parents only relate to their so-called partner through the lens of the child.
The girl lying on that bed is no longer my child, nor my life's work. She is a monster, shaped by you alone.
Does Sophia Lamb interfere with Delta's relationship with Eleanor? Does Jack help Tenenbaum save the little sisters? Does Annabelle Comstock hinder Prophet Comstock's plans to raise his miracle child? It's also curious that the biological parents we encounter are never seen together and typically have their relationship ripped apart before our eyes. Ryan murders his mistress, Jasmine Jolene, Comstock likewise murders his wife Annabelle, and Booker's wife, Annabelle DeWitt, is mentioned only once to say she died in child labor.
So, Mr. DeWitt, is there a woman in your life?
There was. She died.
How?
Giving birth.
Wow. You have a child?
No.
Even then, they are still perceived only through the context of the child. Jack witnesses his mother's murder in an Adam hallucination, and Booker's wife doesn't matter, because all we need to know is that Booker alone is responsible for his daughter. Annabelle's story is only told through the narrative engine of Elizabeth.
I think she's a combination of herself and my feelings towards her.
What do you mean?
I'm just so angry. At her and at my father. I think she's her, but she's also partly me.
These games are about parents and their children, not the love between women and men. The only truly functional parental units happen when the player works with Tenenbaum, but even that is tenuous. You are cooperating with her to help the little sisters and technically fill the mother and father role respectively, but rarely do you act together. By virtue of the very format of the game, cooperation and information are unequal. you are partners only insomuch as the little sisters need you to be. Otherwise, you are just a lone adventurer that some woman has taken pity on in the hopes of you responding in kind. Now that we have firmly shown that mothers and fathers are separate, it is tempting to judge them against each other. After all, Western society casts them as fundamentally complementary but opposite pieces. The father archetype must protect, defend, teach moral lessons, and provide for their children, as we've said, while mothers must nurture, emotionally support, clean, and generally mind their children. It is hard power versus soft power, protection versus comfort, aggression versus healing. But in both reality and the games, parents of any gender do a bit of both. It's impossible to neatly portion out the different types of caregiving between the genders, and frankly, any attempts to do so is a tedious, unproductive waste of time. It's even more so in the case of single-parent situations, where the parent must provide everything for their child, heedless of societal norms or personal taste. Big daddies are viewed as one-stop-shop guardians for their little sisters, comforting and providing for their emotional needs as much as their physical ones. In a similar vein, Dr. Lamb and Dr. Tenenbaum blur the parental gender roles by engaging in both masculine and feminine forms of caregiving. Tenenbaum nurtures the little sisters as best she can, but still uses violence to protect and provide for them.
Stay away from her, or it is you who will be shot next!
And although Sophia Lamb is highly feminine and delicate in her presentation, in practice, she is divorcing herself even more from feminine norms. She spends most of her time away from Eleanor, marshalling her forces to protect her family. On the rare occasion that she is present, Lamb is often cold, physically absent, and emotionally distant.
My physical participation in her birth was minimized, of course. It is vital that I am unhindered by nature's crude bias. I will be, above all, her intellectual progenitor.
Mothers in Bioshock are also more likely to view their children through the masculine lens of legacy than we might find in other series. Lamb calls Eleanor her life's great work, and Tenenbaum considers the little sisters to be both her greatest accomplishment and worst crime, both of them using language similar to Ryan and Fontaine. Annabelle Comstock even goes so far as to despise and abuse Elizabeth because she wasn't her daughter, tainting Annabelle's reputation and legacy as a noble, perfect woman that could sate her husband.
You are! That's my mother. I assure you, madam, my sexual interest in your dear prophet is non-existent.
And Madame Lutece.
Furthermore, the man is quite sterile. As am I. Come here, you little bastard! I want you out of my house!
And yet, mothers still don't have the generational staying power of their male counterparts. Tenenbaum single-handedly cared for the little sisters after the fall of Rapture, and yet it is Jack that they leave with, Jack that they learn from and revere. Lamb ardently tries to condition Eleanor to view the world as she does, and yet Eleanor is able to throw off these beliefs fairly easily, instead clinging to Delta's teachings.
I am free. After everything Mother has done to me, I am alive and sane enough to be curious about the sun. When you rescued my new sisters, I felt every one, and it gave me hope for the first time in years.
Annabelle has almost zero bearing on Elizabeth as a person, beyond their brief moment of understanding, which, let's be honest, feels more like shallow pandering to feminism rather than any sincerely thoughtful commentary on misogyny.
He pretended to love you, like he pretended to love me. Bastard child! I am not your husband's bastard! I am his victim! My days of victimhood are done! We must forgive each other.
Elizabeth regards her mother as little more than a martyr and a source of pain. The women do not have the social influence on their children in the same way that the men do. And it can feel awfully lopsided. A father swoops in for an afternoon and fundamentally changes the child's worldview, whereas the mothers are crawling through the trenches to make a lasting mark. Despite how nuanced these women are, despite their importance to the narrative, they are ultimately periphery characters to both their children and the players. Their complexity and importance is only noticeable when you start digging into the world and themes, and if we're being realistic, most players won't. While I think these shortcomings are worth considering, I'm hesitant to condemn these games and move on. A few uninfluential mother figures does not a sexist game make, nor does it feel right to overlook the careful inclusions and implications in favor of criticizing them. Even the exclusions feel deliberate, like the devs are driving to a larger commentary or point. I cannot say this is the authorial intent of the series. Perhaps I'm merely tying conspiracy string around the devil that plagues us all, internalized misogyny, but there's enough here that it feels like it means something. There are big daddies aplenty in this game, and yet we never hear whisper of big mommies. Get your head out of the gutter. Nor is there any suggestion that the motorized patriots of Colombia would ever include the visage of a founding mother. It feels like an obvious omission considering the popular trope of a mother viciously defending their child.
Stay away from her or it is you who will be shot next!
And the founding mothers being real and well-known people. But the citizens of Colombia and Rapture can't conceive of a world where women are powerful, aggressive, dogged protectors. Nor do the hegemons in power want them to. I would even argue that the splicers that you encounter in Rapture, while highly feminine and engaging in feminine stereotypes, such as housekeeping, gossip, and worrying about appearances, they are frightening because they are violent, because it is incongruous to have a socialite or a young starlet being violent.
Hello? Oh, get the doors and clean it up! The blood!
We must remember, Colombia and Rapture are early to mid-20th century hyper-conservative hellscapes.
Typical broad. Stay away from things you don't know nothing about.
It wouldn't serve anyone in charge if we bucked this convention and created societies that break gender norms and even valorize women as we do so. Those in power benefit from discrimination. No, Colombia and Rapture are disinterested in granting these women legacy. Their interest only lies in chewing them up as fuel. We see Annabelle, Elizabeth, and Daisy turned into martyrs to fulfill greater systems and movements. Yes, I agree this whole thing around Daisy is complicated by racism, but we're focusing specifically on female representation, so let's keep going. Meanwhile, the little sisters are infantilized beyond reason. I mean, look at them. Look at what they're called. Grotesque and gruesome as they are, these girls are viewed as either objects to be babied and adored, or a resource to be used up without a care.
I'll not have him hurt my little ones!
It's okay, lad. That's not a child. Not anymore, Alex. Dr. Tenenbaum saw to that.
Bitte do not hurt her!
The only way they can exist outside of this demeaning infantilization is by growing into a big sister.
Big sister doesn't want you playing with me.
Big sisters fascinate me because they are, functionally, evolutionary accidents. The scientists of Rapture never imagined that these little girls could grow up, perhaps never even intended for them to do so. But here they remain, a complicating factor in Rapture that can't be wrangled or reasoned with, merely survived. Thematically, we might say that Big Sisters are Sophia Lamb's legacy, as she mobilized them, either protecting current ones so that they can harvest more Adam, or stealing more of them from the surface to continue the cycle. However, beyond the Big Sisters doing as Lamb says, there isn't much connection or tie between the two. Lamb doesn't even include them in her cultish framing of family, instead using them as her personal hit squad.
I am the voice, and Big Sister is the hand.
The story doesn't even make much of Eleanor becoming a Big Sister in defiance of her mother. On the other hand, Big Sisters aren't particularly influenced by Big Daddies either. They are somewhat informed, yes, as evidenced by the diving suits and the protector role they play, but that's about it. Their relationship is almost as non-existent as the one they have with Lamb, though when they do interact, it's usually antagonistic. And of course, the way Big Sisters engage with the system is fundamentally different. They protect Little Sisters, but that is more out of empathy and perhaps even a sense of vigilante justice. They perpetuate the system by stealing more children, but that's a perfunctory obligation rather than the result of a strong emotional bond. If anything, I would say they are trying to make sense of a system, the only system they have ever known. The Big Sisters, though clearly holding an affectionate bond with the Little Sisters, are not their parents. They don't teach Little Sisters about the world, aren't shaping their outlook, aren't providing for them, seemingly aren't even living with them. The Big Sisters do the best they can, but in the end, they're just Big Sisters. Just women trying to make their way in a system that never intended for them to exist. They do not become mothers. They do not perpetuate the cycle. They do not foster new youths because they don't know how. At the end of the day, they are just Big Sisters. Girls stepping forward to take care of their little sisters when their parents aren't willing or even able to do the job. And although Bioshock 2 and Burial at Sea have almost no direct links, I find it fascinating that Burial at Sea picks up the Big Sister theme. Elizabeth is the sole protagonist that doesn't fill a parental role. Instead, she steps forward and takes responsibility of Sally as her older sister.
And how you plan on doing that, sister? You some kind of magician? Hey, sister, over here.
Just as the Big Sisters of Bioshock 2, Elizabeth is a warped, jaded young woman in a world that was never meant to hold her.
This world values children, not childhood.
She is struggling with her role in life, a once miraculous daughter that must reconcile her feelings towards her father, even as she navigates a world without him. She is deeply damaged and irreparably changed by her experiences. She is doing her best in a violent, painful world. Elizabeth isn't here to raise a new generation and further the cycle, but rather take care of her own generation. Teach them and love them and make up for abandoning them. She has made vicious mistakes, but she's doing her best. Maybe her little sister will learn something from her. She's just doing her best. Breaking the cycles. The thing about Bioshock is that these cycles end. No matter how viciously entrenched they seem, Bioshock always makes sure that they somehow end. Because that's the whole point, right? Terrible things perpetuate more terrible things on and on and on. And the point of this entire miserable, fantastic little series is giving a damn for once in your life and actually doing something about it. We can't keep shambling into the ground. We have to do something to break free. Somewhere around here, there is a discussion about nature versus nurture, whether these characters act the way they do because of their genetics or because of the environments they grow up in. But, like the discussion of free will, that has never really interested me. At the risk of repeating myself, I don't think the compelling part of this series is what causes people to act. I think it's that we act at all. We're shaped by our environment, we're shaped by our experiences, we're shaped by our fathers, perhaps we're even shaped by our blood. But the point of it all, the reasons our actions matter, is that we make a choice. We choose to act day after day after day in this wretched, weary world, and hopefully we choose to make it better. Jack is the most overt example. Although he is inundated with the horrible, selfish examples of both his fathers, he's still able to choose whether he spares the little sisters. He can show them the kindness neither of his fathers ever showed him. While the player may decide to harvest the little sisters, the canonical ending for Jack is to choose kindness. Despite the malicious doctrine of both Ryan and Fontaine, he chooses to spare the little sisters, raise them, teach them how to be good people, how to navigate life, and maintain families of their own. Bioshock 2 is more ambiguous in its approach. This was less about breaking the generational cycle. Eleanor will unquestioningly embrace whatever Delta has to teach her, but rather breaking the cultural cycle. Do you teach your daughter to be merciful and kind, or do you teach her to keep being a daughter of rapture, seeking out only profit, vengeance, and blood? There isn't a canon ending for this one. That decision is on you. Do you settle into the pain that you suffered through, or do you try to teach your daughter something a little bit better? I hope you choose kindness. I hope you leave Rapture's malice at the bottom of the sea. Bioshock Infinite and its DLC are more subversive in their dismantling of generational cycles, but as with everything else, I believe the message is ultimately the same. Elizabeth, though rocketing through her destructive goth girl era, does ultimately break from the violence of her father. She reaches the point of no return and instead of blundering on, decides to turn back. She finally looks around and realizes that embracing the unhinged and excessive violence of Booker DeWitt as a nihilistic trauma response is bad, actually. Maybe the most worthwhile part of him was when he stopped trying to be violent and selfish and decided to help an innocent kid. Maybe I should try that too. Maybe I can keep that cycle from being quite so infinite. Conclusion. I keep sitting here spinning my wheels as I think about fatherhood in Bioshock, because there's so much to say, and yet it all feels so obvious, self-evident. There's only so much I can tell you that the games haven't just shown you already, and yet some of these things hit me on such a level that I feel like I have to talk about them, because there's something there, right? There's something there when a little sister weeps over her fallen big daddy, but instantly brightens when you adopt her.
Daddy, are you taking me home too?
There's something there when Suchong styles himself as Papa to the little sisters, and Elizabeth hallucinates a nicer, better version of her father, and Booker realizes too late that his little girl grew up too fast, and Eleanor is the last thing Delta sees, and Jack is literally treated like a gun in the carriage by both of his fathers, and Elizabeth being murdered by a big daddy for messing with his little sister mere moments after she murders her own father. There's something there, right? There's something there that I have to say about how wretched and beautiful these fathers and their children are, but I don't know if I even have the language to make it all make sense, so it's just here in my hands and I want to show them to you, but surely you already get it. You played these games. You saw everything I did. You get what I mean when I say that Bioshock has daddy issues.
No.
Surely everyone can see it, and that's why it's gone unspoken. Surely I'm not the only one seeing this spectacularly important human element. Surely everyone already knew. I think a lot of people, when they hear someone talking about fatherhood so intensely for so long, assume that person has a complicated relationship with their own father, and they're trying to work through some things. And I don't. And I'm not. But I have thought a lot about my dad over the course of this essay, because how could you not? Sure, the absurdly violent and bleak nature of the series defies overt comparison, but the themes are still there. The ideas are still there. When I wrote about how fathers sacrificed for their children, I thought about how, when I was a kid, my parents were looking to buy a minivan with automatic doors. My dad later told me that he tested the safety feature of the door on his little finger, because he wanted to know how far the door would close once it encountered resistance. He wanted to know how much danger and pain his children might face if we weren't careful. My dad was willing to lose a finger for us because he just wanted to make sure. He was willing to experience bloodshed and pain to make sure his children remained safe. I think about how, when I was a toddler, I asked my dad to peel an apple for me, but he didn't have a peeler on him, so he just ate the skin himself despite it being his least favorite part. I think about how my dad pulled the knitting needle out of my foot when I stepped on it as a teen. Don't ask, I was being an idiot. I think about how he researched cars that I joked about wanting because he was willing to provide that for me. I think about how, when he comes to visit me now, no matter how I protest and tell him to take it easy, He always does something for me. He cleans my kitchen, he folds my laundry, he buys me household goods, and he sets up an automatic light for my laundry room. He still wants to take care of me, still wants to show me, even now, that he loves me. Maybe that's why fatherhood as a concept and a theme just cracks me wide open. I've seen fatherhood, how much time and energy and dedication and care it takes to even do the basics well. And even outside of the emotionally fraught landscape of Bioshock, there's something so horribly, intensely vulnerable about being a father. You are given a tiny human and told they are yours now. And my gosh, you have to take care of them. This place can be cruel and mean and selfish and cold, and yet you are given a tiny human and told they are yours now. Please take care of them. We hope you take care of them. You may not be in a horror game, but this world is harsh and this child is so helpless and so small. Please, take care of them. There's something beautiful about watching men that are bruised and taciturn decide to take care of someone else because they are small and vulnerable and have done nothing wrong. There is something hopeful about the way they teach these kids to be better than themselves, to avoid the mistakes they themselves have made. Then again, maybe they don't. Maybe they're too selfish, or too neglectful, or too ill-equipped to take care of their kid. Fatherhood is not easy. It isn't effortless. It isn't something that men automatically know how to do. I understand if they fail. I understand if they never even had the tools to succeed, but it still breaks my heart. This was your child. They only wanted to love you. This was your child. You only had to be kind to them. This was your child. Why did you use them as a tool? I can't demand that you love them. I can't even ask that you like them. But you could have been gentle. You could have been kind. You could have done something to help. My dad didn't have a very good father. My grandfather was largely absent from my dad's life and even more absent from mine. I hear stories about him. I remember awkward phone calls with him. I see the tired frustration on my dad's face when my grandfather does something that proves he is the same man as always. It is, for many people, the recipe for a crumbling home life that carries down and down and down. Young men learn to be bad fathers from their bad fathers, and wounded daughters teach that pain to their own children. But that didn't happen with my dad. My dad studied his father and learned exactly what he wanted to do better, what he didn't want to be. So, I grew up with a father that loved me. I grew up with a father that taught me the importance of reliability, charity, and honesty. I grew up with a father that relished in my successes and tried to shield me from pain. I grew up with a father that chose, day after day after day, to do something good. I love my dad. I love you, Dad. I hope everyone else can find a father that makes them feel the same. Take care.